Hey guys, welcome back to another night of historical wandering. It's me again, here to walk with you through the shadows of time as you drift towards sleep. Tonight we're traveling somewhere both familiar and strange, a place that exists in our collective imagination, yet remains fundamentally misunderstood. Medieval times. The era of castles and knights, of princesses and plagues, of faith and fear intertwined. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Find that comfortable position that your body has been craving all day. Let your head sink deeper into your pillow as we explore why you, yes, you, with all your modern sensibilities and expectations, wouldn't survive a single day in the medieval world. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? That we, with all our technological advantages and medical knowledge, would be utterly lost in a time that our ancestors navigated daily. The medieval period whispers to us through stained glass and stone arches, through illuminated manuscripts and half-remembered tales. But its reality was written in calluses and early graves, in hunger and resilience. Tonight we'll peel back the romantic veil and step into the raw truth of medieval existence, not to shock, but to appreciate the distance we've traveled as a species. I always wonder about you, listening right now. Let me know in the comments what country and city you're watching from and what time it is right now. I find it strangely comforting to imagine all of us scattered across different time zones, different continents, yet connected in this moment of quiet reflection. Some of you might be starting your evening, others desperately seeking mid-afternoon rest. Some might be watching as the first light of dawn approaches. Wherever you are, whatever time it shows on your clock, I'm grateful you're here. Only if this calms you, consider subscribing or leaving a gentle thumbs up. But your rest matters more than any button or algorithm. I'd rather you drift into peaceful sleep halfway through this video than stay awake for its entirety. That's the paradoxical purpose of these long, quietly winding narratives, to lose you to dreams somewhere along the way. Tonight we'll walk through doorways of time, feeling what it meant to exist in a world both harsher and somehow more honest than our own. A world where survival wasn't guaranteed, where comfort was rare, where life burned shorter but perhaps brighter for its brevity. We'll explore not just the facts of medieval life, but the sensations, the emotions, the daily texture of existence that no textbook can fully capture. So close your eyes if they're growing heavy. Let my voice be the boat that carries you across centuries, across the river of consciousness into the deeper waters of sleep. The medieval world awaits us with all its contradictions, its struggles, its surprising moments of beauty amid the hardship, and perhaps by understanding how we wouldn't survive there, we might better appreciate the soft bed beneath you now, the climate-controlled air around you, the medical miracles we take for granted, and the unprecedented comfort in which most of us now live our longer, easier lives. Our journey begins not with kings and queens, not with famous battles or political intrigue, but with something much more fundamental, the simple experience of waking up in a world utterly foreign to our modern senses. Let's cross that threshold together. You wake in the dark, but not your familiar darkness. This darkness has texture, has weight, has smell. Your modern bedroom has vanished, replaced by something more primitive, more immediate. The air feels different against your skin, heavier somehow, as if the centuries themselves have substance. The first thing you notice is the smell, earthy, dense, a mixture of smoke and humanity that catches in your throat. It's not entirely unpleasant, just foreign, primal. The accumulated scent of lives lived closer to the elements, smoke from last night's fire, lingers in the thatch above, in the rough fabric of your coverings, in your hair. There's no escaping it. It becomes part of you, a constantly present companion. This is not a vacation. This is survival. This is the 13th century, and your modern sensibilities are already gasping for air. Your lungs fill with the past, a past unfiltered by museum glass cases, or the sanitizing distance of history books. The rawness of it startles you fully awake, though the darkness remains nearly complete. Sounds reach you that have no place in your modern existence. The low shifting of livestock nearby, not in some distant barn but perhaps separated from your sleeping area by nothing more than a crude partition. The scurrying of small creatures in the thatch overhead, the creak and sigh of a dwelling built by hand, settling through the night like a living thing, and beyond that, silence of a quality you've never experienced. No distant traffic, no electrical hum, no planes overhead. A silence so complete it feels like pressure against your eardrums. You bring with you expectations, perhaps romantic ones, knights and ladies, castles reaching toward heaven. But what awaits is both simpler and more complex than stories have prepared you for. The medieval world exists not in the exceptional moments history remembers, but in the mundane rhythms that history forgot. The daily struggle for food, for warmth, for one more day of existence in a world indifferent to individual survival. Your body feels different too. There's an ache in muscles unaccustomed to physical labor, a hollowness in your stomach that speaks of different patterns of hunger and satisfaction. Your teeth feel strange in your mouth, perhaps already showing wear that your modern dentistry has always prevented. Your hands, softer than any hands in this century, have a right to be, seem alien even to yourself. The darkness around you isn't just the absence of light, it's the presence of the unknown. Modern humans are rarely truly in the dark. We have streetlights through our windows, the glow of devices, the option to banish night with the flick of a switch. Here, darkness is sovereign, holding secrets and dangers your ancestors understood instinctively. Your eyes strain to adjust, to pull shapes from shadow, to make sense of this new reality. Time itself feels altered. Without the precision of digital displays, without the regimented schedules of modern life, you become aware of how artificially we've divided existence. Here, time is measured in heartbeats, in breaths, in the slow shifting of stars beyond the walls. Minutes and seconds are meaningless concepts. The rhythms of body and nature dictate the passage of moments. The surface beneath you bears no resemblance to your engineered mattress with its pressure-relieving layers. You lie on straw, perhaps, or if you're fortunate, a simple stuffed pallet. It rustles with your movements, pokes through its covering in places, harbors tiny lives you prefer not to contemplate. Yet bodies have slept on such surfaces for centuries before you arrived, finding rest despite or perhaps because of their connection to these simpler materials. You reach instinctively for the conveniences of your time, the phone to check the hour, the light switch to banish darkness, the thermostat to adjust discomfort. Your hand finds only air, then rough wall, a stark reminder of your displacement. These absences are perhaps more shocking than what is present, the negative space of progress not yet realized. The temperature is another adjustment. No central heating maintains a perfect 70 degrees. The air holds the lingering chill of night, even indoors. In winter, this cold would be bone deep, a presence as real as any person. In summer, the heat would build through the day, trapped under thatch and timber. The human body in medieval times existed in constant negotiation with elements we've largely engineered away. You lie there processing these sensations, this new reality. Perhaps fear should be your primary response, yet something more complex emerges. A strange recognition. Beneath the unfamiliar surfaces of this world pulses something deeply, fundamentally human. The same stars turn overhead, the same human hearts beat with hopes and fears. The same human ingenuity works to create meaning from existence, however harsh. Others sleep nearby, family most likely. As privacy is a luxury few can afford in this time, their breathing creates a gentle rhythm, a reminder that humans have always found ways to exist, to persist, to create moments of peace, even in difficult circumstances. Their presence is both comfort and constraint. The medieval world functions through interdependence, through bonds both chosen and imposed. Your mind races with questions. How will you communicate? Your language has evolved over centuries. How will you explain your strange clothing, your unusual mannerisms, your lack of calluses and skills this world deems essential? Or perhaps you arrive as an observer only, ghost-like, experiencing but not interacting, a mercy perhaps, given the complex web of social rules and expectations that govern every aspect of medieval existence. As your eyes adjust to this new darkness, morning arrives not with alarm clocks, but with the patient insistence of hunger and the gradual lightening of the world outside. Dawn approaches not as a time on a clock, but as a slow transformation, black to grey to the first hint of colour. The roosters you've heard about in stories really do announce the day, their calls carrying across the settlement as nature's alarm. Movement begins around you. The medieval day starts with first light. Wasting daylight is wasting life in a world without easy illumination. Bodies rise from rough beds with none of the snooze button reluctance of modern mornings. There is work to be done, always work, the constant labor of simply maintaining existence. You rise too, your body responding to cues more ancient than civilization. Light means activity, darkness means rest. A simplicity your modern circadian rhythm, confused by artificial light and late-night screens, has long forgotten. There's wisdom in this pattern, your body seems to say, as it pulls you upright despite your disorientation. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, cold and unyielding. No memory foam slippers await you. No hot shower promises to ease you into wakefulness. The day begins with sensations both sharper and more elemental than you're accustomed to. Discomfort that cannot be immediately relieved, needs that cannot be instantly gratified. Outside, the world is transforming from the mysterious realm of night to the workaday reality of the medieval morning. The settlement, village, town, or city comes alive around you. Voices call in accents your ear struggles to decipher. Animals add their opinions to the growing chorus of the day. Somewhere, metal strikes metal, wood strikes wood, the percussion of labor beginning. You stand at the threshold between modern expectations and medieval reality. The day stretches before you, full of challenges your life has never prepared you to meet. Yet humans have always adapted, have always found ways to navigate the world they're given. The question remains, would you survive these 24 hours in a world both simpler and infinitely more demanding than the one you left behind? Discomfort is your first companion of the day. It introduces itself through all your senses at once. The stiffness in your back from the unyielding sleeping surface, the sour taste in your mouth with no toothpaste to mask it, the lingering smell of smoke and unwashed bodies, the dim interior of the dwelling as your eyes struggle to adjust, the rough texture of homespun fabric against your skin. Modern humans rarely experience such a complete sensory reorientation upon waking. Your bed is a straw mattress, home to more than just your tired body. Small inhabitants rustle within its depths, fleas and bedbugs that have coexisted with humans for centuries, seeing no distinction between peasant and noble flesh. You find yourself scratching automatically, your body responding to irritations your modern existence has largely eliminated. These tiny companions will follow you throughout your day, a persistent reminder of the different relationship with nature that medieval life entails. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth in most dwellings, stone if you're in a place of unusual prosperity. No carpet cushions your steps. No heated tiles take the chill from your soles. This connection to the ground is immediate, unavoidable, a constant awareness of the earth from which all life in this time is directly sustained. Your feet, accustomed to engineered support and cushioning, register this new reality with each step, hard, cold, uneven. You look around at your sleeping quarters. Space is used differently here, with different priorities. The concept of specialized rooms for specific activities, bedrooms just for sleeping, dining rooms just for eating, is largely absent except in the wealthiest households. This space serves multiple functions, its purpose shifting through the day according to need. The bed you've just left might fold away, or simply be pushed to the side. Nothing is wasted. Nothing exists solely for aesthetic purposes or convenience. Is no shower awaits you. Is no toothpaste. The morning breath of centuries past lingers in every conversation, a universal human condition, accepted as simply part of existence. Personal hygiene follows different patterns here, less frequent, more purposeful, defined by scarce resources, and different cultural understandings of cleanliness. The morning cleaning ritual, if it happens at all, might be a quick splash of water on the face, a rinse of the mouth, a cursory attempt to bring order to hair and clothing. You reach for comforts that don't exist yet. The automatic coffee maker, the climate control, the running water, the privacy of a modern bathroom, each absent convenience creates a small shock of realization. The infrastructure of comfort you navigate unconsciously each morning is centuries from invention. Here, each necessity must be actively procured, water carried from well or stream, fire kindled anew each day, food prepared from the most basic ingredients. The light filtering through small windows or open doors creates patterns on the floor, marking the beginning of a day measured by the sun rather than the clock. Time feels simultaneously more vague and more precise, less rigidly divided into numerical units, but more directly connected to natural rhythms. Your body, despite its modern conditioning, responds to these ancient cues, awakening to patterns encoded in human DNA long before alarm clocks existed. Others around you move with practiced efficiency, performing morning routines with the unconscious grace of long habit. They know exactly how much water to heat, how to quickly transform from sleeping to waking state with minimal resources. Their movements contain no hesitation, no fumbling for the right tool or process. This is not a historical reenactment for them, but simply Tuesday, no different from the hundreds of Tuesdays before it. Children, if present, are already being directed toward their day's tasks. Childhood is a protected state of play, and learning is a luxury few can afford in this time. Even the youngest contribute to household survival according to their abilities. You watch small hands performing practiced motions, stirring pots, feeding animals, sorting items, and recognize a maturity in their eyes that seems out of place in such young faces. The morning meal, when it comes, bears little resemblance to your expected breakfast. Forget perfectly frothed lattes and avocado toast. Forget cereal and pasteurized orange juice. The most common morning sustenance might be a simple porridge of whatever grain is locally abundant, perhaps flavored with salt if you're fortunate, maybe sweetened with honey if you're prosperous. It might be leftovers from the previous night, waste being an unthinkable luxury. It might, in harder times or poorer households, be nothing at all. The spoon you eat with, if utensils are used, is likely wooden, worn smooth by years of use. The bowl might be wood as well, or rough pottery if available. Metal utensils are precious, reserved for those of higher status. These implements are probably shared among family members, the concept of individual place settings being far in the future. You eat what is available when it's available, gratitude being more common than choice. Morning conversations, if any occur during the rush toward daily labor, focus on immediate concerns, the weather and its implications for work, the state of livestock or crops, the tasks requiring attention, the local news passed through oral networks of communication. No one discusses distant events beyond walking distance, unless a rare traveler has brought news. The world feels simultaneously smaller and more immediate. Your clothing for the day presents another challenge. The concept of pajamas, of specific clothes for sleeping versus waking activities, is largely absent except among the wealthy. You likely slept in a simplified version of your daily attire, or perhaps in nothing at all, depending on the season and local customs. Getting dressed isn't a matter of fresh clothes each day, but of putting on the same garments worn yesterday and many days before, perhaps with minor adjustments or the addition of work-specific items. These garments feel different against your skin, heavier, coarser, constructed for durability rather than comfort. They may smell strongly of smoke, sweat, and work, carrying the olfactory history of days or weeks of wear. Washing clothes is an arduous process requiring significant time and energy, not the simple matter of tossing items into a machine. The relationship between body and clothing is more intimate here, more accepting of natural processes and scents. Morning light brings new visibility to the dwelling around you. In daylight, you notice details lost in the darkness, the careful construction of the simple furniture, the clever storage solutions in a world without closets and cabinets, the small touches that transform shelter into home. Despite material poverty, there is beauty here, though of a different kind than you might recognize at first. The beauty of functionality, of generations of accumulated wisdom about how to create comfort with minimal resources. Your modern body, accustomed to climate-controlled environments and ergonomic support, protests these new conditions. Muscles ache from the unfamiliar sleeping surface. Your digestive system questions the strange breakfast. Your skin itches from rough fabric and tiny passengers. Yet the human form is remarkably adaptable. These discomforts, while acute now, would gradually fade into background awareness if you remained in this time, your senses adjusting their baselines for what constitutes normal sensation. As the household moves into the rhythm of morning work, you become aware of the absence of certain modern morning rituals. No checking of emails or news feeds, no commute through traffic, no complex decisions about which of many possible breakfast options or clothing choices feels right today. The narrower range of possibilities creates a different kind of mental space. Fewer choices, but perhaps deeper attention to each necessary task. But hunger doesn't wait for comfort. It knows only its own language, spoken the same way for millennia. Your stomach groans, reminding you that despite all differences between your time and this one, certain biological imperatives remain unchanged. Hunger has always been hunger, the body's direct communication that energy is needed, that survival requires nourishment. This sensation, at least, is familiar, a bridge between your world and this one. The simplest things you take for granted are now luxuries beyond imagination. A grain of salt, a spoonful of honey, clean water that won't leave you retching for days afterward. Your modern palate, accustomed to global flavors and perfect consistency, stands unprepared for the reality of medieval sustenance. Food here isn't cuisine. It's survival. The bread that centers most meals in this time would shock your modern sensibilities. It breaks teeth, not like the soft pillows from your grocery store, dark, dense, and often containing bits of millstone grit that gradually wear down enamel. This is fuel rather than pleasure. The whiteness of flour, something you've never considered significant, is here a marker of extreme wealth. The brown bread of the common folk containing every part of the grain, and often stretched with fillers when grain runs short. You watch as dough is prepared for the day's baking. The labor involved in creating this staple food startles you. The growing of grain through months of uncertainty, the harvesting by hand, the threshing, the milling, the careful measuring and mixing, the tending of fire, the timing of bake. Each loaf represents countless hours of human effort, a concentration of summer sunlight and human sweat transformed into calories that sustain life through winter's scarcity. What you eat depends on who you are, and most of us would be the many, not the few. The stratification of medieval food isn't subtle. A nobleman's table groans under meats and sweets while children with distended bellies watch from a distance. The caloric inequality feels visceral here, written on bodies in ways your time has partially disguised through different forms of processed foods available to various economic classes. The wealthier households enjoy meats in abundance, fresh in summer, preserved through smoking or salting in winter. They season with exotic spices carried across dangerous trade routes, display their status through imported delicacies and elaborate preparation methods. They eat from the top of the food pyramid because they sit atop the social pyramid, their consumption as much about display as nourishment. For ordinary people, meat appears infrequently, perhaps on feast days, perhaps in small amounts added to pottage to flavor the more abundant vegetables and grains. Animals are too valuable as sources of renewable resources, milk, eggs, wool, labor, to be casually slaughtered for protein that can be obtained through other means. The chicken that lays eggs daily is worth far more alive than as a single meal. You find yourself thinking constantly about your next meal, as everyone does. This isn't the casual relationship with food that marks modern abundance, the absent-minded snacking, the skipped meals, the casual waste of leftovers. Hunger is a present companion in medieval life, sometimes at a distance, sometimes pressing close, but never entirely absent from awareness. The body knows with animal certainty that food is not guaranteed. Meals center around a pot suspended over fire, the original one-pot cooking that trendy modern cookbooks try to recapture without the smoky eyes and burned fingers. Into this pot goes whatever is available: vegetables from the garden in summer, preserved vegetables in winter, grains, occasional meat or fat for flavor, herbs both for taste and medicinal properties. The resulting pottage forms the core of nutrition, a perpetual stew sometimes kept going for days, refreshed with new ingredients as they become available. Water, which flows clean and safe from your modern taps, presents dangers here that wine and ale do not. The fermentation process that creates these daily beverages kills harmful microorganisms that thrive in medieval water sources. Children drink watered ale, adults stronger versions, the mild alcoholic content a constant background to daily hydration. The taste of these beverages, sour, yeasty, variable, would surprise your standardized expectations. The bread is dense, dark, and sometimes contains more surprises than nutrients. Insect parts, rodent droppings, ergot fungus, these unwelcome additions appear regularly, despite best efforts at cleanliness. Food safety exists not as government regulation, but as generations of passed-down wisdom, as careful observation of what sickens, and what nourishes. You eat cautiously, learning to examine each bite in a way your plastic-wrapped, inspected modern food has never required. Specialized tools transform raw ingredients into edible form. The mortar and pestle grinds herbs and spices, releasing aromas that fill the dwelling. The cooking pot, likely the most valuable item in a common household, shows the patina of countless meals. Knives serve multiple purposes, their edges maintained through regular attention. Each implement represents significant investment, not purchased casually, but acquired with intention, maintained with care. often passed through generations. Seasonal eating isn't a trendy lifestyle choice, but the inescapable reality of agriculture. Without modern transportation and preservation, spring brings tender greens after winter's preserved stores have dwindled. Summer offers brief abundance. Autumn demands frantic preservation of harvest bounty, and winter tests the sufficiency of those preservation efforts. Your body learns to crave what is available, to celebrate each first appearance, the first strawberries, the first fresh greens, the first new potatoes still warm from the earth. Storage methods shape the flavor and texture of everything you consume. Smoking, salting, fermenting, drying, these ancient preservation techniques leave their distinctive signatures on meat, vegetables, dairy products. Nothing tastes quite like its fresh self after preservation, but these altered flavors become their own categories of experience, valued for their unique qualities rather than considered inferior substitutes for fresh. Scarcity breeds creativity. Parts of plants and animals your modern sensibilities might reject become valuable resources. The bitter outer leaves of cabbages, the feet and organs of animals, the stems and roots that require longer cooking to become palatable. Nothing edible goes to waste in a world where hunger looms as a constant possibility. The concept of food waste would be incomprehensible to medieval minds. What cannot be eaten by humans feeds animals or returns to the soil. Meals themselves follow different patterns than your three-square modern expectation. The main meal often comes at midday, when daylight allows for easier eating, and the body needs fuel for afternoon labor. Evening sees a lighter repast. Morning perhaps just a quick breaking of the night's fast. The timing responds to natural light and work requirements rather than arbitrary convention or personal preference. Eating is communal, not the individualized experience common in modern households where family members might eat different meals at different times. The pot yields its contents to all present. The bread is torn rather than sliced. Hands reach toward common dishes. This shared experience of nourishment reinforces social bonds, the literal breaking of bread together a daily renewal of connection. You observe the physical effects of this diet on those around you. Teeth show wear from gritty bread. Bodies reflect the seasonal cycles of plenty and scarcity. Growth patterns differ from the steady progression you're accustomed to seeing in well-nourished modern children. The medieval body carries visible evidence of its nutritional history, unmasked by modern interventions and supplements. Yet amid this utilitarian approach to sustenance, moments of pleasure emerge. The first taste of spring honey, after winter's austerity, brings genuine joy. The feast day's special additions to the usual fare, a bit of precious sugar, a rare spice meat in abundance, create memories that sustain through plainer times. The human capacity for finding delight, even in circumstances of constraint, asserts itself in the appreciation of small luxuries that your abundant time might not even register as special. As the day's first meal settles in your stomach, the world outside begins its ancient rhythm, a dance of necessity that waits for no one. The bread's dense calories fuel muscles unaccustomed to constant physical demand. The ale's slight alcoholic content takes the edge from discomfort without impairing function. Your body begins to understand food not as entertainment or comfort, but as essential fuel for survival, a relationship both simpler and more profound than your modern experience has prepared you to appreciate. Your back already aches, but the day has barely begun. Modern bodies, shaped by ergonomic chairs and limited physical demands, enter medieval labor unprepared for its relentless nature. Every task here relies on muscle power, human or animal, with minimal mechanical advantage. The industrial and technological revolutions that would transform human relationship to physical work lie centuries in the future. Here, bodies are the primary tools, wearing down like any implement used daily without respite. The sun becomes your timekeeper, your taskmaster, your constant companion. It rises, and so must you. It reaches zenith, marking midday pause for the main meal. It sinks toward horizon, signaling the transition to evening tasks completed by firelight. No clocks divide the day into artificial units. No schedules exist separate from natural rhythms and seasonal requirements. Time expands and contracts with the seasons. Winter days short and compressed, summer days stretching toward exhaustion. Your hands, soft from modern conveniences, meet their new reality through blisters and torn skin. Every medieval task involves direct contact with materials, wood that splinters, metal that burns or cuts, earth that abrades, animals that kick and bite, plants that prick and scratch. Calluses aren't aesthetic concerns, but necessary adaptations, the body's defense against constant friction and pressure. You watch those around you handle rough materials with practiced ease, their skin armored through years of identical movements. Exhaustion is not something to overcome. It's simply the state of being alive. The medieval workday continues until the work is complete, or darkness makes continuation impossible. The concept of 8 hours, of weekends, of vacation time, these boundaries that shape modern work experience are absent. Labor and life intertwine completely. The distinction between work and not work often meaningless. In a world where survival requires constant attention, you observe the division of labor around you, not arbitrary, but following patterns established through generations of practical experience. Men typically handle tasks requiring upper body strength or taking them farther from home. Women manage household production, childcare, gardening, textile creation, food preservation, and numerous other skilled tasks essential to family survival. Children contribute according to their abilities, learning through direct participation rather than abstract education. The specialized nature of modern work, where individuals might perform one narrow function repeatedly, gives way to seasonal variety and broader skill requirements. The same hands that plant in spring harvest in autumn, the same person who tends animals, also repairs tools, constructs necessities, participates in community projects. This variety provides relief from the repetitive strain injuries common in modern specialized labor, though it replaces them with general wear on all body systems. No weekends, no vacations, no retirement, only seasons that change while your hands remain the same. The medieval concept of time off comes primarily through religious observance. Sundays and numerous saints' days provide pause in the work rhythm, though many essential tasks like animal care continue regardless of calendar. These breaks serve both spiritual and practical purposes, allowing bodies some recovery while reinforcing community bonds through shared ritual and celebration. You notice how workspaces reflect different priorities than modern efficiency experts might recognize. Tasks often involve social elements, women spinning together while supervising children, men working fields in coordinated groups, conversations and songs making repetitive labor more bearable. Work isn't segregated from other aspects of life, but integrated into the social fabric, productivity balanced with human connection in ways your time clock punching world has largely forgotten. Your fingers crack and bleed, your shoulders burn, your knees speak to you in a language of pain. The physical demands reshape your awareness of your own body. Parts that functioned invisibly in your modern environment now announce themselves through discomfort. You develop a new relationship with pain, not as emergency requiring immediate relief, but as expected companion. the body's communication system providing necessary feedback about limits and requirements. Tools extend human capability but require human power to function. The plow doesn't drive itself. Arms and shoulders push it through resistant earth. The spinning wheel needs feet to pump its treadle. The loom requires continuous physical manipulation. Each tool represents generations of incremental improvement, elegant solutions to production problems, but none eliminates the need for substantial human effort in its operation. Specialized knowledge passes primarily through apprenticeship rather than formal education. Young people learn by doing, by watching, by gradual assumption of responsibility under experienced guidance. This practical education creates deep understanding of processes from raw material to finished product. The wheelwright knows the properties of different woods. The blacksmith understands metal at molecular level through observation of its behavior under various conditions. Weather dictates work patterns with absolute authority. Rain means indoor tasks, perhaps repairing tools, processing materials, preserving food. Sunshine after rainfall creates urgent demand for haymaking before moisture causes rot. Winter brings different work than summer. The processing of materials harvested and stored during growing season, the repair of items that will be needed when planting time returns, the careful management of stored resources to ensure survival until next harvest. Risk exists as constant backdrop to medieval labor. A missed step on rickety scaffolding means not workers' compensation but permanent disability in a world without social safety nets. A moment's inattention with sharp tools or around large animals can be fatal. Fire, essential for cooking, heating, crafting, threatens constant danger of devastating loss. Yet workers move with surprising confidence through these hazards, their bodies trained through repetition to avoid common dangers. The medieval workday permits different rhythms than the constant productivity of modern expectations. Intense effort alternates with brief rest. Conversation flows around repeated motions. Tasks requiring deep concentration receive undivided attention, uninterrupted by emails or notifications. The body works hard but within sustainable patterns developed through centuries of practical experience with human limitations. You observe the effects of this labor on bodies around you. People age differently, not the gradual cosmetic changes of modern aging but the progressive wearing down of physical capacity. Joints swell, backs curve, movements slow, yet work continues regardless of these changes. Tasks modified to accommodate changing abilities rather than retirement, removing older workers from productive contribution. The rewards of labor are immediate and tangible in ways modern work often isn't. Fields transform from empty to abundant through visible stages. Raw materials become useful objects before your eyes. Food moves from garden to table under your own power. The connection between effort and outcome remains unbroken by complex economic systems or distant supply chains. Creating satisfaction modern workers often seek through hobbies rather than finding in their paid employment. Pride in craftsmanship reveals itself in small details, the decorative element added to a functional object, the extra care taken in finishing, the willingness to discard and restart rather than accept flawed results. This isn't mere perfectionism but recognition that objects made with care might serve for generations, might define the maker's reputation long after death. Quality isn't enforced through external regulation but through community standards and individual integrity. As your body gives itself to the ancient work, the social world around you takes shape, a structure as rigid as the soil beneath your plow. Labor doesn't exist in isolation but within complex networks of obligation, cooperation, and hierarchy. The fields you might till belong to someone else. The grain you harvest passes through many hands before becoming bread. The objects you help create move through economic exchanges, both simple and surprisingly sophisticated. Human relationships form the infrastructure supporting all medieval labor, the communities that raise barns together, the families that divide essential tasks among members, the lords and peasants bound in mutual if unequal obligation, the craft guilds maintaining standards and training new generations. No medieval person works truly alone. Interdependence isn't philosophical concept but practical necessity in a world where individual survival requires collective effort. The day stretches before you, measured not in hours but in tasks completed, in progress visible, in energy gradually depleted until sunset brings its natural conclusion. Modern concepts of work-life balance hold no meaning here, not because balance doesn't exist, but because work and life aren't separate categories requiring integration. They flow together as single current, the human experience undivided by artificial boundaries between productive and personal time. You were born into your place. You will die in your place. The ladder has few rungs, and they rarely allow for climbing. Modern notions of social mobility, of reinvention, of merit-based advancement, these concepts would seem as fantastical to medieval people as smartphones and air travel. Here, the social order doesn't simply influence life circumstances, it defines the very boundaries of possibility from first breath to last. The medieval world operates on a principle your egalitarian sensibilities might find difficult to accept, that human beings are fundamentally unequal by divine design. Those who pray, those who fight, those who work, this tripartite division of society places each person within a framework of mutual obligation but vastly different privilege. Your modern understanding of basic human equality, regardless of birth circumstances, finds no widespread philosophical foundation here. The nobles pass by, and you lower your eyes, not out of respect, but because looking directly might be mistaken for challenge. Their clothing announces their status before a word is spoken. The vibrant colors achieved through expensive dyes, the fine textures of imported fabrics, the embellishments that serve no practical purpose except to display wealth. Their bodies, too, tell the story of privilege, taller from better nutrition, smoother skin from less exposure to elements, hands unscarred by labor. You observe how speech changes with social position. Those above speak with certainty, with assumption of being heard. Those below moderate their voices, choose words carefully, understand the potential consequences of communication misinterpreted. Language itself becomes stratified, perhaps French or Latin for nobility, local dialect for commoners. The ability to shift between these registers, a skill that marks those moving between worlds. Acceptance comes not from contentment, but from the understanding that rebellion means death. The social order maintains itself not just through economic realities, but through force when necessary. The gallows standing at the town's edge isn't theatrical decoration, but practical deterrent, a reminder that challenging established hierarchies carries consequences beyond the individual. The system's stability depends on collective acceptance of its inevitability. Children absorb their place through observation, long before explicit instruction. Watch how the blacksmith's son already mimics his father's stance, how the nobleman's daughter carries herself with practiced dignity at age 5, how the serf's children hunch slightly even in play. These physical manifestations of status become so deeply ingrained, they seem like natural characteristics rather than learned behaviors shaped by social expectation. You can smell rank and privilege before you see it. The clean clothes, the perfumed bodies, the The unworked hands. Scent marks social division as clearly as clothing or speech patterns. Those who can afford regular changes of garments, who have access to imported spices and perfumes, who remain distant from the physical substances of survival, carry their privilege in the air around them. The medieval nose understands social hierarchy with extraordinary sensitivity. Women occupy complex positions within this hierarchical structure. A noble woman outranks a male peasant, yet lacks many freedoms her male social equals take for granted. Female labor, though essential to household survival at all social levels, often remains less visible, less recognized than male contributions. Yet within defined spheres women exercise authority, managing household economies, preserving food, producing textiles, practicing healing arts, wielding influence through relationships. Religion reinforces the social order, even as it sometimes offers rare paths for transcending it. The Church teaches that earthly hierarchies reflect divine intention, that suffering in one's assigned place earns heavenly reward, yet occasionally, exceptional individuals rise through religious institutions based on intellect or spiritual gifts rather than birth, making the Church simultaneously a justification for hierarchy and one of the few avenues for exceptional social movement. Physical space reflects and reinforces these divisions. The manor house occupies higher ground, constructed of more permanent materials, its interior spaces specialized for specific functions. Common dwellings cluster below, simpler in construction and organization. The Church stands between these worlds, magnificent beyond ordinary experience, yet accessible to all, a physical manifestation of both divine glory and the promise that all stand equal before God, if nowhere else. The marketplace offers rare neutral territory, where different social classes interact through economic exchange, though never as equals. Here, the merchant class operates at the boundaries of traditional categories, not nobility, yet sometimes wealthier, not laborers yet essential to economic function. Their existence introduces complications to the theoretical three-part division, creating spaces where ability might occasionally supersede birth. In determining one's trajectory, justice operates differently, depending on one's position. The same offense committed by noble or peasant leads to vastly different consequences. Courts apply different standards, different procedures, different punishments based on social standing. What might result in a fine for one means physical mutilation for another. The concept of equality before the law remains centuries away, an unimaginable reconfiguration of the world's fundamental organization. You notice how deference has been choreographed into physical movements. The bowed head, the step aside, the waiting for permission to speak. These bodily expressions of hierarchy aren't conscious performances, but unconscious habits formed through lifelong practice, through observation of consequences when proper forms aren't observed. The body knows its place even before the mind articulates it. Children born to different stations might play together in earliest years, but separation begins early. By 7 or 8, their paths diverge dramatically, one to apprenticeship or field labor, another to education in letters and weapons. Their childhood friendship becoming increasingly awkward as they internalize their different destinies. These early separations ensure the system reproduces itself in each generation, social distance becoming insurmountable through habituation. Clothing laws in many regions explicitly regulate who may wear what fabrics, colors, and styles, making fashion not self-expression, but visual enforcement of social boundaries. These sumptuary laws attempt to prevent those rising in wealth from adopting the visual signals of classes above them. The need for such regulations reveals the underlying anxiety that visible markers of status might be disrupted if not legally maintained. Language encodes the presumption of inequality. Terms of address change depending on who speaks to whom. Certain topics become inappropriate when discussed across class lines. Humor itself varies. What provokes laughter in the Great Hall differs from what brings mirth around the village fire. These separate linguistic worlds reinforce separation as effectively as physical barriers between living spaces. Yet human connection sometimes transcends these rigid categories in quiet moments. The Lord's son, raised partly by a peasant wet nurse, may retain affection for her beyond what the social order prescribes. The priest educated at university still understands the dialect of his shepherd father. These small bridges across social chasms rarely challenge the system, but create narrow passages through which occasional compassion and understanding might travel. Marriage usually occurs within one's class, with exceptions requiring extraordinary circumstances. The rare cross-class union often results in the higher status partner being pulled downward rather than the lower rising, another mechanism by which the system maintains its integrity across generations. Love as primary basis for marriage, a concept your romantic modern sensibilities take for granted, remains largely irrelevant to these arrangements focused on economic alliance and social stability. As you observe this world of rigid stratification, you might wonder about happiness. Is it possible within such constraint? Yet, human adaptation creates space for contentment even within narrow boundaries. When expectations align with possibilities, when identity forms around one's assigned place, satisfaction doesn't require the infinite options your modern world provides. Purpose and meaning exist within defined parameters, derived from fulfilling one's role within the ordained structure. As the sun moves across the sky, measuring your worth in shadows, other dangers emerge beyond the social order, threats that affect all levels of society, though not equally. Disease, that great leveler, makes its presence known indiscriminately, though resources to address it remain as unevenly distributed as all other aspects of medieval life. A fever is not just a cough. A fever is not just discomfort. Each small ailment carries whispers of mortality. Your modern mind, conditioned by antibiotics and antivirals, by vaccines and emergency rooms, has forgotten the primal fear that accompanies even minor symptoms in a world without medical certainty. Here, a scratched hand might lead to lethal infection. A winter chill might become pneumonia with no effective treatment. The threshold between health and catastrophe is paper thin. The medieval relationship with illness differs fundamentally from your own. Disease isn't simply biological malfunction, but potentially divine judgment, astrological influence, imbalance of bodily humors, or malevolent magic. These explanatory frameworks aren't primitive superstitions, but complex systems developed through centuries of observation and interpretation, attempting to make sense of suffering within available knowledge structures. The barber approaches with knives and leeches, their purpose indistinguishable from torture to your modern sensibilities. Yet this figure represents the highest medical technology available to most people. Barber surgeons handle everything from haircuts to tooth extractions, from bloodletting to amputations. Their tools simple, their anesthetics limited to alcohol and opium when available. Their practical knowledge, passed through apprenticeship rather than formal study, includes techniques both surprisingly effective and horrifyingly misguided. University-trained physicians, rare and expensive, operate from theoretical frameworks derived from ancient Greek and Arabic texts. They may never touch a patient, considering physical examination beneath their dignity, instead analyzing urine color or pulse patterns. Their diagnoses and treatments reflect sophisticated intellectual traditions, but often lack empirical effectiveness. They serve primarily the wealthy, their knowledge inaccessible to common people facing most everyday ailments. Fear becomes your physician, prayer your medicine. Powerlessness in the face of disease creates profound anxiety but also remarkable resilience. Communities develop rituals around illness, some practical, like isolation of the sick during contagious outbreaks, others spiritual, like specialized prayers to patron saints associated with particular afflictions. These practices offer psychological comfort, even when they cannot provide physical cure. The monastic infirmary represents another avenue of care, where religious brothers and sisters tend the sick as spiritual obligation. Their herbal remedies, developed through centuries of careful observation and documentation, sometimes offer genuine relief. Monastery gardens grow medicinal plants organized according to their properties, living pharmacopoeias, maintained by generations of careful cultivation and recorded knowledge. You observe how the boundaries between medicine, religion, and magic blur in everyday practice. The herb gathered under specific astrological conditions, the prayer said while applying a poultice, the symbolic associations of ingredients. These elements intertwine in healing practices that address body and spirit simultaneously, reflecting a worldview where physical and metaphysical realms remain inseparable. The taste of herbs force down your throat, bitter promises of health with no guarantees. Remedies challenge your palate with unfamiliar intensities. The sharp bite of yarrow, the musty resistance of dried mushrooms, the eye-watering strength of garlic and onion preparations. These natural pharmacopoeias contain both genuine pharmaceutical value and placebo comfort, their effectiveness varying widely depending on the actual condition and the specific preparation. Childbirth represents perhaps the starkest contrast between medieval and modern medical realities. This natural process, now routinely survived by mother and child in your world, here stands as a threshold of extreme danger. Midwives bring generations of practical knowledge to this critical event, but complications that modern medicine resolves easily often result in tragedy. You notice how birth and death exist as closer companions here, the beginning and end of life separated by thinner margins. Surgical intervention occurs without antiseptics, without effective anesthesia, without modern understanding of anatomy. Operations that routine outpatient procedures would address in your time require extraordinary courage from both practitioner and patient. Here, yet some surgical techniques have developed remarkable sophistication through practical experience. Bone setting, wound closure, trepanation to relieve pressure on the brain. Their success rates better than chance, though far below modern expectations. No antibiotics, no anesthesia, no understanding of what invisible enemies wage war within your body. The concept of germ theory lies centuries ahead, leaving medieval healers to work with observable symptoms rather than underlying causes. Contagion is recognized as phenomenon, but attributed to bad air or miasma rather than microscopic organisms. This misunderstanding leads to some ineffective preventative measures, but also some accidentally useful ones, like isolation of the sick. Mental illness receives interpretations ranging from demonic possession to humoral imbalance to spiritual affliction. Treatment might involve exorcism, dietary adjustments, herbal sedatives, pilgrimages to healing shrines, or in some cases surprising compassion and accommodation within community structures. The line between religious experience and mental disorder remains particularly blurry, with some behaviors considered saintly in one context and evidence of possession in another. Chronic pain becomes life's expected companion rather than medical emergency. Those suffering ongoing conditions develop accommodations, communities develop support systems, work patterns adjust to incorporate different abilities. The absence of effective pain management, creates different relationships with physical discomfort, not necessarily greater suffering, but different integration of pain into normal existence, different thresholds for what constitutes bearable versus unbearable. You notice how care for the sick falls primarily to family members, particularly women, who develop considerable practical knowledge through experience. These informal healers constitute the front line of medieval healthcare, their hands mixing poultices, their voices offering comfort, their observations determining when to seek more specialized intervention. Their unrecognized expertise passes orally between generations, practical wisdom accumulated through countless sickbeds. Plague hangs in collective memory and present fear, its devastating visitations remembered in story, its potential return a constant anxiety. Communities that survived these epidemics carry both trauma and hard-won knowledge about containment, about which measures seem to offer protection. The medieval world's experience with mass mortality shapes attitudes toward illness, toward authority, toward community obligation during crisis in ways that feel suddenly relevant to your pandemic-experienced modern perspective. The combination of limited effective remedies and frightening symptoms creates space for charlatans promising miraculous cures. Markets and fairs feature traveling healers selling preparations of questionable value at high prices, their theatrical demonstrations drawing desperate customers. Some may offer genuine relief through placebo effect or occasional valid ingredients, but many leave their patients both poorer and still suffering. Exploitation of vulnerability as old as illness itself. Disability appears differently in this context. Without standardized definitions or specialized institutions, individuals with various conditions integrate into community life according to their abilities. A person who cannot walk might become skilled in sedentary crafts. A person with limited intellectual capacity might handle simple agricultural tasks. The absence of many modern accommodations creates greater hardship, but the necessity of each person's contribution sometimes creates flexible inclusion alongside undeniable marginalization. Recovery from serious illness or injury happens at home rather than in specialized facilities. The sickbed positioned near household activities, healing occurring within the stream of daily life. Convalescence follows different timelines without antibiotics to speed infection resolution or physical therapy to guide rehabilitation. Bodies heal at their natural pace or not at all. Communities adjusting around the extended needs of the recovering. As pain and uncertainty become your bedfellows, the world outside continues its march toward evening. Disease represents democracy of a sort, the great leveler that reminds even the most privileged of their mortal vulnerability. Yet resources to address suffering remain unequally distributed, with nobles receiving the best available care while peasants rely primarily on folk knowledge and community support. Even death maintains the social hierarchies that organize life. The smell of your own body becomes something you no longer notice. This gradual olfactory adjustment represents one of the most profound sensory shifts between your time and this one. Modern bodies washed daily with scented products, deodorized and perfumed, maintain an aromatic neutrality that would seem bizarrely artificial here. Medieval existence embraces human scent as inevitable background, noticeable only when it significantly deviates from communal baseline. Bathing is a rare luxury, sometimes feared as much as disease itself. The relationship between water and body follows different rhythms than your daily shower routine. Full immersion might occur seasonally rather than daily, perhaps at major holidays or significant life transitions. Bathing facilities require substantial effort to prepare, hauling water, heating it, creating private space, making the process too labor-intensive for casual frequency in most households. Theories about water's effects on health complicate hygiene practices. Opening the skin's pores through warm bathing creates vulnerability to disease-causing miasma. In medieval medical understanding, this belief, while incorrect by modern standards, contains accidental wisdom in contexts where bathing water might indeed carry contamination, or where public bathhouses might facilitate disease transmission. Fear of water isn't simple ignorance but complex risk assessment within available knowledge frameworks. You learn to live with discomfort, with itching, with the constant companionship of parasites. Lice inhabit the hair of saints and sinners alike. Fleas contribute their persistent attention regardless of social standing. These tiny cohabitants create a background irritation that becomes normal, scratching an unconscious gesture, rather than response to unusual stimulus. Methods exist for mitigating their worst effects: combs with fine teeth, herbal repellents, strategic shaving, but elimination remains impossible. The practical aspects of medieval hygiene focus on visible cleanliness, rather than microbial elimination. Hands and faces receive more frequent attention than covered body parts. Clothing serves as primary barrier between body and world, with outer garments protecting inner layers that touch the skin. Visible stains and obvious odors prompt intervention, while invisible microorganisms, unknown until future centuries, continue their activities unhindered. Teeth cleaning involves abrasives like salt, herbs that freshen breath temporarily, and tools ranging from chewed twigs to primitive toothpicks. The medieval smile often displays missing or discolored teeth, dental problems accepted as inevitable progression rather than preventable condition. Pain from dental infection becomes so common as to barely merit comment unless it prevents eating or working. Extraction offers the primary solution when pain becomes unbearable. The streets run with waste, both animal and human, rivers of disease flowing freely through populated areas. Waste disposal relies on simple systems: chamber pots emptied into streets or dedicated middens, livestock moving through urban spaces leaving their contributions, butchering operations conducting their messy business wherever convenient. The concept of systematic sanitation exists in some more advanced cities but remains basic by modern standards. Ditches to channel waste toward rivers, ordinances about where garbage may be deposited. Surprisingly, some aspects of medieval waste management display sophisticated understanding of practical necessities. Many towns employ dedicated workers to collect certain types of waste, particularly valuable manure for agricultural use. Human waste eventually returns to fields as fertilizer, completing nutrient cycles in ways modern sewage systems often interrupt. What appears as primitive disposal often functions as practical recycling within agricultural economies. Your clothes stiffen with dirt and sweat, becoming a second skin that rarely leaves your body. Laundering involves intensive labor, hauling water, preparing lye or other cleaning agents, scrubbing by hand, drying over bushes or lines. This process damages fabrics, wearing them thinner with each washing, creating practical incentive to clean clothes less frequently than modern washing machines. Encourage. Outer garments might receive spot cleaning rather than full immersion, preserving their structure longer. Bedding harbors its own ecosystems, straw mattresses becoming homes to multiple species over their usable lifespan. Shaking and airing provide primary maintenance, with full replacement occurring when deterioration reaches extreme levels. The intimate relationship between sleeping bodies and these habitats creates exchanges of organisms, of skin cells, of oils and fluids that would horrify modern hygiene sensibilities, but represent normal conditions throughout most of human history. Personal grooming serves both practical and social functions. Hairstyles, beard trimming, and head coverings follow practical considerations, controlling parasites, managing work-related hazards, while simultaneously communicating social status, marital availability, cultural affiliation. These practices require community assistance. Few can cut their own hair or trim their own beards, creating regular rituals of mutual care that strengthen social bonds while addressing hygienic needs. Indoor air quality presents challenges unknown to your ventilation-controlled modern existence. Smoke from cooking and heating fires fills interior spaces, especially in colder months when windows remain closed against weather. This persistent smoke irritates lungs, stings eyes, and darkens interior surfaces, yet also provides inadvertent antimicrobial effects and helps preserve wooden structural elements against insect damage. Bodies adapt to this atmospheric assault, developing tolerances modern lungs would find immediately distressing. Water sources determine community health in ways inhabitants might recognize through experience without understanding microbiologically. Wells located downstream from waste disposal areas create higher incidence of illness. Springs emerging directly from ground tend to offer safer drinking options. These practical observations sometimes lead to protective taboos or local regulations. Certain water sources designated for drinking and cooking, others for washing or livestock. Menstruation involves reusable cloth materials managed without modern conveniences, like running water or disposable products. Women develop practical systems for handling these regular needs, the knowledge passing between generations as essential life skill rather than taboo subject. While various cultural and religious attitudes surround menstruation itself, the practical management remains matter-of-fact necessity handled with experienced efficiency. Childbirth and its aftermath involve blood and fluids managed without modern medical supplies. Birthing spaces are prepared with practical considerations, access to water, materials that can be cleaned or discarded, positioning for both mother's comfort and attendants' access. The postpartum period includes specific practices for managing ongoing discharge, healing tissues, and beginning lactation. These practical aspects of recovery addressed through generations of accumulated wisdom. Your modern conception of privacy around bodily functions finds little reflection in medieval reality. Elimination occurs in more communal contexts. Shared privies, chamber pots emptied without ceremony, roadside relief during travel. The natural processes of digestion carry less shame, less need for elaborate concealment and deodorization. Bodies function as bodies have always functioned, their operations neither highlighted nor hidden, but simply accommodated as inevitable aspects of existence. Despite what modern perspectives might consider severe hygiene limitations, medieval people develop their own standards and take pride in meeting them. Clean hands before eating, faces washed in mourning, special attention to cleanliness before religious observances or social events. These practices matter within their cultural context. Appearing clean by community standards remains important socially and psychologically, even as those standards differ dramatically from future norms. As you navigate this world of sensory assault, the approaching evening brings different fears. The transition from day to night carries practical and psychological significance beyond the simple fading of light. As bodies adjust to medieval hygiene realities, as noses adapt to different olfactory baselines, as skin accommodates its tiny inhabitants, other senses heighten to navigate the coming darkness, a darkness profound beyond modern experience. Night falls differently when light cannot be summoned with a switch. The transition from day to evening progresses through distinct stages, each requiring adjustment, each limiting human activity in ways your electricity-enabled life has forgotten. First comes the gathering dusk, when detailed work becomes impossible, when colors fade to monochrome. Then the deepening shadows when familiar objects transform into ambiguous shapes. Finally, the true darkness, profound, textured, alive with both real and imagined movement. This darkness becomes a living thing, filled with threats, both real and imagined. Medieval nights contain legitimate dangers, human predators, taking advantage of concealment, wild animals emboldened by hunger, treacherous terrain, becoming deadly without visual guidance. They also harbor psychological perils, the mind's tendency to populate darkness with its fears, to interpret normal sounds as threatening, to lose orientation in spaces familiar by daylight. Both types of danger shape behavior, creating communal strategies for managing nighttime's inherent risks. Preparing for darkness constitutes a daily ritual, with life or death implications. The careful positioning of candles and rushlights for maximum efficiency. The banking of fires to preserve precious coals until morning. The securing of livestock against nocturnal predators. The barring of doors against human intruders. These preparations begin while light still allows for careful work, their completion essential, before visibility fails completely. Nothing is left to chance when darkness brings vulnerability. Your senses sharpen as vision fails, ears straining for sounds of approach. The medieval night arrives not with the electronic hum of modern darkness, but with its own soundscape, the settling of structures cooling after day's heat, the movement of nocturnal animals, the rustle of humans adjusting positions on straw mattresses, the occasional call between night watchmen marking the hours. These sounds carry different significance than daylight's auditory landscape, each potentially signaling safety or threat. No street lights, no police to call, no safety, but what you create yourself. The institutions and technologies that create modern night safety don't exist. Community security depends on informal arrangements, designated watchmen in larger settlements, the mutual protection of family groupings, the deterrent effect of known consequences for violating community peace. Smaller villages might simply retreat behind barred doors at sunset, surrendering exterior spaces to darkness until dawn reclaims them. Movement after dark requires practical adaptation. Those venturing out carry their illumination with them, lanterns shielded against wind, torches flaring and smoking, simple candles cupped against breeze. Each light source presents its own limitations and dangers. Fire carried through darkness offers guidance but also attracts attention, creates night blindness beyond its limited radius, brings risk of burns or larger conflagrations. The careful management of portable light becomes essential survival skill. The flickering candle light creates monsters from shadows, turns familiar rooms into caverns of uncertainty. Interior spaces transform under weak moving illumination. Corners deepen. Everyday objects cast shifting shadows that seem to breathe. The transition between illuminated foreground and dark background constantly shifts with every small movement of flame. This unstable visual environment contributes to the rich tradition of ghost stories and supernatural encounters that flourish in pre-electric cultures. Sleep patterns differ from modern expectations of consolidated 8-hour blocks. Medieval nights often involve first sleep and second sleep separated by a period of quiet wakefulness, a time for contemplation, conversation, intimacy, or prayer. This biphasic pattern accommodates both the extended darkness of winter nights and the body's natural rhythms free from artificial light disruption. The silent middle hours between sleeps create space for types of consciousness and connection modern schedules have largely eliminated. Darkness equalizes certain social distinctions while heightening others. The noble and peasant face similar visual limitations after sunset, yet their resources for managing darkness differ dramatically. The wealthy enjoy more and better quality illumination, beeswax candles instead of smoky tallow, multiple light sources rather than single flames, servants to maintain optimal lighting without interrupting other activities. Even in darkness, privilege maintains its advantages. Fire serves as both salvation and threat during night hours. The hearth at center of household provides essential warmth, minimal light, focal point for night gathering, yet simultaneously threatens destruction if not properly tended. Night fires claimed countless medieval structures, spreading rapidly through timber frames and thatch with little hope of effective control once established. The balance between necessary flame and potential catastrophe requires constant vigilance. The physical boundaries between human and natural worlds weaken after sunset. Creatures enter villages under cover of darkness. Wolves in harder times, foxes and smaller predators as routine visitors, owls hunting rodents attracted to human settlements. The wild presses closer during night hours, testing the artificial separations humans have constructed, reminding inhabitants that their dominance remains partial and contingent. Stars provide both practical guidance and psychological comfort to those navigating darkness. The night sky, unmarred by light pollution, displays celestial patterns with breathtaking clarity, offering navigation cues, seasonal markers and connection to cosmological frameworks that explain human position within larger order. Looking upward during medieval night means encountering both practical information and existential context simultaneously. Fear serves protective function rather than psychological burden in this context. The heightened alertness, the careful attention to unusual sounds, the instinctive caution about movement after dark, these responses improve survival chances in environments containing genuine threats. What modern perspectives might label anxiety or paranoia functions as appropriate adaptive mechanism when darkness conceals legitimate dangers without technological protections. Certain professions claim the night as their domain. Night watchmen patrol community boundaries, calling hours and watching for fire or intruders. Midwives often work during darkness when many births reach critical stages. Millers sometimes operate during night hours when water flow remains consistent without daytime agricultural demands. These night workers develop specialized knowledge about darkness, serving as intermediaries between day and night worlds. Stories take on special power when shared in darkness. The circle around fading firelight creates perfect environment for tales that explain the unexplainable, that bind listeners together through shared emotional experience. The tradition of night storytelling serves multiple functions: entertainment during hours unsuitable for productive labor, transmission of practical knowledge embedded in narrative, reinforcement of community bonds through collective experience. The Church offers structured response to night's terrors through evening prayers, through saints specifically associated with protection during darkness, through blessed objects believed to ward off night dangers, both spiritual and physical. These religious frameworks provide psychological tools for managing fear while establishing behavioral patterns like evening prayer that serve practical safety functions by accounting for household members and securing dwellings before full darkness descends. Dreams hold different significance in medieval understanding, potentially carrying divine messages, visitations from departed souls, prognostications of future events, or evidence of spiritual warfare occurring during sleep. This perspective transforms nighttime consciousness from simply reduced awareness to alternative state where important spiritual and psychological work occurs. Dream interpretation becomes practical skill, rather than mere entertainment or psychological curiosity. As you huddle in darkness, the community around you becomes both your protection and your constraint. Extended night hours, especially during winter months, force closer physical proximity, shared resources, mutual dependence, too often romanticized by modern notions of pre-industrial community. This closeness brings security, but also friction, conflicting needs negotiated in confined spaces, private desires subordinated to collective survival requirements imposed by darkness's limitations. The approach of dawn brings visceral relief. that transcends cultural or historical boundaries. The gradual lightening of eastern sky announces renewed safety, restored capability, return to fuller version of human agency. This transition from vulnerable night to empowered day creates daily experience of renewal, of survival, of having once again outlasted darkness, a rhythm your electrically illuminated existence has muted, but not entirely erased from human psychological response. Survival does not belong to the strong, nor to the clever, nor even to the lucky. In the medieval world, it belongs to the bonded. You do not endure because of your intellect or willpower, but because others wake when you are ill, lend when your stores run dry, stand beside you when the sky cracks open and threatens everything you've grown. Independence, the modern virtue, would be seen here not as admirable, but as dangerous. It is not strength, but separation. And separation, in this world, more often than not, is death. The village you find yourself in is not a collection of individuals, it is a single living thing, each person a part of the whole. A thatcher might never weave cloth, a weaver might never shoe a horse, and a blacksmith may never milk a goat, but together, they build something that no single hand could. The interlocking skills, the sharing of tools, the exchange of time and labor, this is the hidden engine that turns behind every plowed field and every full bowl. There is comfort in this closeness, in knowing your place, not as restriction but as rhythm. You are expected, needed, known. Your face is recognized in every doorway. Your voice is one thread in the village's larger song. In the modern world, your name may be a username, a floating icon in a sea of millions, but here, your name carries stories, and those stories are passed in firelit rooms, whispered while mending nets, told to children under the watch of stars. You observe how community forms, not just through necessity, but through repetition. It's in the hundreds of shared sunrises spent pulling weeds from the same patch of earth, in the silent nods exchanged during moments of shared exhaustion, in the borrowed tools returned with gratitude. These small rituals, layered over seasons and generations, bind people in ways that require no oaths, no contracts, no declarations. A person who shows up reliably, kindly, competently, earns a kind of invisible wealth. You learn quickly that your life is not your own, not fully. Your time is stitched to the lives around you. If someone's roof leaks, you go. If someone's cart breaks, you help. If a death strikes a neighboring house, you bring bread, or firewood, or simply your presence. And you do so without thinking, not because you are particularly generous, but because one day it will be your fire that burns out, your table that sits empty, your grief that needs holding. There are no locks on doors, no passwords, no alarm systems. Security, instead, comes from knowing that the eyes of others are upon you, not as surveillance, but as stewardship. Children are watched not only by their parents, but by the baker, the widow, the shepherd, the priest. Each pair of eyes, a piece of the village's collective care. This communal vigilance creates safety, but it also enforces conformity. Kindness and obedience bring inclusion. Defiance brings isolation. In this closeness, conflict is unavoidable, but the resolution, too, is personal. A disagreement over pasture land might be settled by the village elder with a gentle word or a stern one. A grievance about borrowed goods might be hashed out in the open, in front of others who nod, murmur, witness. There is no anonymity here, no walking away from your history. Each choice leaves a ripple in the shared water all must drink from. There is little room for secrets, That which is done in the night is known by morning, not always spoken aloud, but known. This knowing creates a kind of soft discipline. Your behavior becomes a story someone else will tell. Reputation matters more than gold. A generous act may follow you for years. A single betrayal, longer still. Still, there is joy. It bursts through hardship, like sun through storm clouds. Festivals bloom on the calendar, like wildflowers. The feast of the Nativity, the coming of spring, the end of harvest. These are not luxuries, but necessities. In a life ruled by toil, celebration becomes survival too. Music is played. Bread is shared. Bread is shared. Dances swirl under lanterns strung between trees. Laughter echoes over fields, past the river, into memory. The children play in these fields, unwatched, yet watched, free, yet tethered. They learn not from structured lessons, but from imitation. A child might learn to carve from watching a grandfather, might learn to spin from a sister, might learn compassion from how the baker kneels to retie the old man's boots. These moments are the education of the heart and of the hands. In marriage, you do not just marry a person, you marry a family, a network, a history, a plot of land, a future filled with obligations and hope. The decision is rarely yours alone. Parents, elders, sometimes even lords weigh in. And though this may seem oppressive, it also means that your marriage is not your burden alone. It is carried by many, shaped by many, sustained by more than love. The elderly are not left behind. Their joints may ache, their pace may slow, but their value deepens with time. Their memories hold the knowledge of when the frost came early, which herbs to use for fever, how to read the clouds when storms roll in. They become living libraries, and their presence is honored, sometimes silently, but deeply. Strangers are not shunned, but watched. A newcomer must prove themselves, through labor, through patience, through humility. Over time, if they stay, if they contribute, they become part of the weave, not because of what they say, but because of what they do. Inclusion is not promised, but earned. And in the church, stone cool, even in summer, lit with soft flickers of candlelight, there is the deepest sense of togetherness. Knees bend in unison. Voices rise in shared prayer. Even the poorest find equality before the altar. The rituals are ancient, familiar, grounding. Births are celebrated. Deaths are mourned. All within the same walls, under the same vaulted ceiling. The church is not just a spiritual center. It is the beating heart of community life. You might notice how few people spend time alone. Solitude is rare. Privacy, rarer still. But loneliness, less common than you might expect. Because even when the labor is grueling, when the crops fail, when a child dies, there are always others beside you, sharing the sorrow, carrying the burden, keeping the fire lit. And in that firelight, as night falls once again, and the village folds itself into sleep, you feel something unexpected. Not just the strangeness of this world, not just the hardship or the lack, but something quieter, deeper, a sense of place, of being part of something older than you, larger than you, made not of ideas but of people, real, flawed, kind and necessary. You are not just in the village, you belong to it, and it, in turn, belongs to you. And just as you begin to understand this comfort of connection, the flickering torchlight from the edge of town signals something else, a call to gather, not for labor or worship, but for story, a tradition even older than bread. Let us walk there together. The church bells mark not just time, but the rhythm of existence itself. They ring out across the fields and forests, calling not only the body, but the soul. They do not merely divide hours, they divide heaven and earth. Their sound is not heard, it is felt deep in the chest, deeper still, in the part of you that has no name. When they toll, heads bow instinctively, hands still mid-task, hearts pause to remember, we are not alone in this world. Faith here is not a decision. It is not a Sunday event or a private whisper of hope. It is the very water in which you swim, the air you breathe without question. From the first time your eyes open to the flicker of candlelight beside your mother's bed, to the last time they close beneath the weight of a priest's blessing, faith holds you. It defines your birth, your marriage, your harvest, your sickness, your death. You do not believe, you live belief. The church stands at the center literally and symbolically. Its spire reaches higher than any roof, its bell louder than any voice, its shadow longer than any wall. Within its stone walls echo the hopes and terrors of the community, the prayers offered for good weather, the weeping of confession, the silence of awe. No separation exists between the sacred and the daily. The priest blesses your bread and warns of your sins in the same breath. God watches not just on holy days, but in every cracked bowl and every spilled seed. You walk into the church not for novelty, but necessity. The stone floor chills your knees as you kneel, no cushion offered nor expected. The scent of beeswax and incense clings to the air, mixing with the damp of stone and the lingering breath of a dozen prayers. Light filters through stained glass in fractured beams, touching the faces of peasants and lords alike with equal grace. The Latin chants swirl around you, words you do not understand but feel with certainty nonetheless. They are not language, they are music, are mist, are mystery. Fear and comfort intertwine like vines through your thoughts. You fear damnation, yes, eternal suffering, purging fire, divine judgment, but you are also comforted by the idea that life has meaning, that suffering is not random, that death is not the end. The church gives structure to the formless chaos, a reason for plague, a purpose in drought, a divine eye watching even when the Lord turns his back. You witness miracles and curses with equal reverence. A child surviving fever is a blessing. A cow dying in spring, punishment for a hidden sin. Superstition and scripture walk hand in hand. You whisper charms alongside your Hail Marys. You carry a piece of saintly bone and a pouch of dried herbs sown by your grandmother. Both protect, both matter. The holy and the humble hold equal power in your world. Relics are kept behind iron bars, bones, cloth, wood touched by the divine. You wait in line to glimpse them. You kneel, you weep, you believe, because to not believe would be to untether yourself from the only map that makes sense of your days. Pilgrims come from other towns, other countries, limping toward hope, their feet blistered, their eyes bright with desperation and devotion. You offer them bread, a blessing, perhaps a story of the last time the relic saved your neighbor's son. Saints become your companions. You call upon them like old friends, Saint Christopher for safe travel, Saint Brigid for childbirth, Saint Roch when illness spreads like smoke through the village. Each saint holds a piece of heaven close enough to touch. Their statues wear real clothes, their images receive kisses, their names are whispered into bread, dough, carved into lintels, sewn into wedding garments. Witchcraft is not fantasy here, it is real, or real enough to cause fear. a woman who speaks too boldly, a man who knows the names of too many herbs, a child born with an extra finger. These things ripple through the village. Whispers rise like mist. A trial might follow, or a quiet disappearance. The line between healer and heretic is thin, and drawn by those with fear in their hearts. The calendar of your life is shaped by feast days and fasts. Lent's hunger reminds you of Christ's suffering. Easter's bells feel like resurrection, not just of spirit but of earth itself. Bulbs returning to branches, warmth seeping back into soil. Christmas comes not with lights and gifts but with candles and long vigils, waiting for the light to return. Every sacred season reflects something in nature's own rhythm. The church teaches not only morality, but how to live in time. There is no schoolhouse for most, but there is learning. The priest teaches what matters, how to pray, when to kneel, what sins require confession. You learn not from books but from symbols. The lamb carved into the chapel arch, the serpent etched near the font. The cross, of course, always the cross above doors, on walls around necks, painted on coffins. You do not need to read to know what it means. The supernatural is not elsewhere, it is here, always. Angels may walk the roads disguised as beggars, demons might whisper in dreams, ghosts of the unshriven might pass your door at midnight. The invisible world is not separate from the visible, it overlaps, it breathes with you. Your dreams carry meaning, your nightmares are warnings. Every illness has a spiritual cause, every recovery a miracle. The priest is not merely a preacher, he is a mediator between you and the mysteries. He blesses your crops, your newborns, your coffins. He tells you what dreams mean, which sins to confess, which actions might doom your soul. His power is spiritual, yes, but it is also political, social, economic. His word can lift or condemn, and still, he kneels before the same altar, confesses the same sins, hungers for the same absolution. Sometimes the line between sacred and scared blurs. The storm that shakes the chapel roof feels like God's anger, the stillness before dawn, like divine presence. Faith is not gentle, it is full of thunder, it demands, it comforts, it shapes your spine and your sleep. You believe not because you are told to, but because it is impossible to live here without belief. To live without faith would be to live without gravity, and yet, it is not only obedience, there is joy, too. There are hymns sung while harvesting, prayers whispered into babies' ears, blessings shared over bread. There are moments when your chest swells with something too large to name, hope, perhaps, or grace, or simply the sense that life is more than what it appears, that something watches, something cares, something endures. The boundary between religion and superstition, between truth and tradition, blurs in practice. You light candles not just for saints, but for lost loves. You sprinkle holy water on a child's cradle, and also on the garden fence to ward off pests. You mutter both Latin and the old tongue in the same breath. You cross yourself before you eat, and also before walking through fog. You learn that faith is not certainty, it is survival. In the dark, in the cold, in the silence. After the plague cart passes, faith remains. A fragile, flickering thing, yes, but also the only flame that does not die. And as belief shapes your nights and governs your fears, you begin to notice something else. How time itself bends and breathes under the weight of holy rhythms, not seconds and hours, but bells and fasts, festivals and vigils. A calendar shaped by stories, not schedules. Let's follow its passage together. Time moves differently here, marked not by clocks, but by sun and stars, by planting and harvest, by the sound of hooves on thawing ground, and the silence of snow settling on a thatched roof. There are no hours to track, no minutes to count, no beeping reminders, no glowing rectangles measuring every second. Here, time is fluid and cyclical, less a march forward than a spiral returning, again and again, to the same sacred turning points. You begin to feel it in your body, the weight of winter in your bones, the restless itch of spring in your hands, the heaviness of harvest in your back, the slow exhale of autumn in your lungs. Time is not external. It lives within you. It teaches you patience without words. It disciplines your impulses, not through punishment, but through rhythm. The day begins not when your phone tells you, but when the sky lightens from black to deep indigo, and it ends not at midnight, but when the last ember fades, and your body succumbs to fatigue that work has earned. Night is not a nuisance to be banished. It is a boundary, a teacher of rest. The sun becomes your only reliable clock, the stars your map, the moon your calendar. Seasons here are not quaint background decoration. They are characters in your story. Spring arrives as a shy visitor, hesitant and tender, bringing with it the first hints of green, a blade of grass, a crocus, a thin sheen of warmth on your skin. You feel it, not just in the air, but in your chest, a loosening, a lifting, hope as sensation. The first shoots of barley make your throat tighten. Hunger may still linger, but it has a countdown now. You are surviving winter. You are returning. Summer is not leisure, but labor. It is long days of sweat-soaked linen and blistered hands, of weeds pulled and water hauled, and fields watched with anxious prayer. There is joy, yes, ripe berries, the scent of cut hay, laughter during late twilight, but it is a joy steeped in pressure. Every sunny day is a gift with strings attached. Work harder now, store more, prepare, because always, on the edge of your mind, winter waits, autumn brings reward and reckoning. Baskets fill, cellars crowd, smoke rises from drying herbs and curing meat, but this is not abundance without anxiety. You measure your harvest by how long it must last. You weigh your joy in apples against the months ahead. Gratitude is never simple. It arrives wrapped in calculation, in prayer, in ancient fears, whispered around the fire. And then, winter. Winter is not just cold, it is a siege, a test of your planning, your storage, your resilience. The days shorten until light becomes a precious commodity. The sun arcs low, its warmth fleeting. The fire becomes your most intimate companion, tended with vigilance, guarded like a heartbeat. You wear all you own. You eat what you preserved. You wait, not idly, but watchfully. Patience here becomes more than a virtue. It becomes survival. Nothing happens quickly. A field takes seasons to yield. A sickness takes days to pass or worsen. A child takes years to become a helping hand, and so your soul adjusts. You stop rushing. You learn to wait with your whole being. You come to understand that growth, like healing, does not obey your urgency. You mark time with feast days and phases of the moon, with the flowering of trees and the migration of birds. You notice how the light changes, how shadows lengthen. You learn which wind brings rain and which brings frost. Nature becomes your calendar, your teacher, your oracle. You don't count days, you listen for them. You become, slowly, and without knowing it, an instrument of the seasons, played by forces larger than yourself. You are bent like wheat in wind, hardened like oak in frost. Your joy expands in summer and contracts in January. You begin to expect nothing to stay the same, and that expectation becomes a kind of peace. The year is not one shape but many, a circle of repetition, a ladder of tasks, a river of return. There are times to sow and times to reap, times to mourn and times to dance. Ecclesiastes becomes not a scripture, but a lived truth. To everything, a season. To everything, a reason. Each season has its smells. Spring smells of wet earth and new green. Summer of sweat and sun on wood. Autumn carries the scent of decay and spice. Winter smells of smoke, of wool, of bodies huddled close. These are not just details, they are reminders. Time is sensory. Time is alive. You begin to remember differently. You do not say last month. You say when the elder tree bloomed, or after the last frost, or in the week the geese flew over. Memory attaches to moments that matter, not numbers on a page. Emotion binds itself to natural signs, to smells and textures, to sounds. The cold teaches humility. The thaw teaches gratitude. The heat teaches endurance. The wind teaches listening. Each element, each pattern, each shift in the sky becomes a line in the poem of your life. A poem written not in ink, but in repetition and feeling. There is no wasting time here, only waiting with it, working within it, accepting its gifts and its refusals. You begin to understand that nothing blooms forever, that even the most beautiful fields must lie fallow, that even the most joyful days carry a shadow. This is not pessimism, it is preparation, it is balance. In a world where death is near, where food can run out, where firewood can dwindle, you learn not to count your years, but to count your seasons. How many springs have I seen? How many summers did I harvest well? How many winters did I survive? Age becomes not a number, but an accumulation of endured cycles, of lessons embedded in the weather of your skin. And when you see the elderly in your village, their steps slow, their gazes deep, you realize they are not merely old, they are timekeepers. They are living calendars, memory books, guides. They know when the rains came early. They remember the winter when the river froze solid. They carry not just stories but survival. You find that time does not belong to you, you belong to it. You are folded into it, like cloth into a chest, and somehow, in surrendering your control over it, you find peace. You let go of constant measurement. You release your fear of delay. You begin to trust the slow, powerful turning of the earth beneath you. And when the solstice arrives, whether winter's longest night or summer's fullest light, you do not celebrate it as a novelty, but as a sacred hinge in the door of the world, a turning point, a reminder that nothing, not even darkness, lasts forever. And so, as the wheel of the year turns once more, you begin to see time not as a thief, but as a weaver, each day a thread, each season a knot, each year a tapestry more beautiful for its imperfections, its wear, its fading in places. And in that pattern, something quiet and beautiful whispers, "This is what it means to be alive." And as that tapestry unfurls, you begin to feel the thread of life itself thinning in your fingers, not as something tragic, but as something real and precious. The brevity of life here is not a fear, it is a truth, and truth in this world is sacred. Let us now walk beside that oldest of companions, death. It arrives not as a stranger, but as a neighbor, familiar, predictable in its unpredictability. In the medieval world, death is not hidden behind white curtains or confined to hospital corridors. It walks openly, brushing shoulders with life, standing quietly in fields, slipping silently into homes. You do not wonder if it will come, only when, and how, and whether you will be ready. You grow up knowing it. The way children today know cartoons or holidays, medieval children know funerals and farewells. They help dig graves, they learn the smell of sickness, they memorize prayers for the dying before they memorize their own names. Death is not taboo, it is taught. Birth is fragile. A mother clutches her newborn, not with certainty, but with cautious hope. Many do not live to see the next full moon, and so baptism comes fast, sometimes within hours, not for ceremony, but for salvation, a spiritual shield, just in case. Infants are swaddled, not just in linen, but in prayers. You stop counting years and start counting seasons. A 30-year-old carries the weight of 50 in your modern eyes, wrinkled hands, missing teeth, a lifetime of cold winters and calloused work. They are not young adults, but elders, survivors, witnesses to all that the plague did not take. Few reach true old age. 50 is rare, 60 exceptional. If someone grows grey-haired, they are no longer just a person. They are a living library, a vessel of memories, rituals, seasons. A body bent not by decay, but by endurance. There are no life insurance policies, no hospitals, no interventions to reverse disease. A fever is not a passing inconvenience. It could be the end. A broken bone might never mend straight. Childbirth is a gamble with odds you pray to tip. Yet you are not paralyzed by fear. You move forward, not because you are brave, but because there is no other choice. You work, you laugh, you give birth, you bury. You live not despite death, but with it. Pain becomes part of the body's language. Aching knees, rotting teeth, failing eyes. These are not problems to be solved. They are facts to be endured. You walk slower, you carry less, you hum to distract yourself. You become your own doctor, your neighbor's nurse, your family's midwife. Healing is community knowledge passed hand to hand. And when someone dies, the entire village knows, not through a post or an announcement, but through the slowing of footsteps, the stillness of smoke, the hush at the well. Grief ripples outward. Women gather, men lower their eyes, children stare and remember. There's no need to pretend. Mourning is honest here, but mourning is not the end. The field still waits to be sown. The animals still need to eat, so the dead are buried, songs are sung, bread is shared, and then life picks up its tools and moves forward, pulling sorrow behind it like a worn cart. And in this closeness with death, life becomes more vivid, a warm bowl of stew, a baby's laugh, a clear sky after weeks of rain. You notice more, you feel more, not because you are sentimental, but because you know everything. Even joy is borrowed time. People dance, even after loss, not to forget, but to remember the ones who can no longer dance. They feast in honor of those who no longer hunger. Grief and joy exist side by side, woven together, not opposed. This, too, is survival. Even the way you say goodbye changes. It becomes quieter, less grand. A longer hug, a second glance, a piece of bread left behind, a kindness, just in case. Every goodbye carries the weight of possibly being the last. And so you live not forever, but fully. You do not plan for retirement. You do not delay your dreams. There are no bucket lists. There is only now, this meal, this fire, this fire, this fire, this fire, this breath. In this world, happiness does not come from security or long-term planning. It comes from presence, from making it through another winter, from waking up with someone you love still breathing beside you. You celebrate with what you have. You cherish what you might lose. The people here are not morbid. They are not pessimistic. They are practical. Death is not a horror. It is a fact. It is not ignored. It is integrated. And in accepting it, they do not become numb. They become grateful. The funeral is not just an end. It is a mirror. It reminds you that this will be you one day, that your name will be spoken by those who outlive you, that what you build, what you give, what you love, will echo in the memories left behind. And still, there is music. Still, there is dancing. Still, there is wine and wool and warmth, because to stare too long at the darkness, without lighting a flame, is to forget what it means to be human. And that is perhaps the greatest lesson of medieval mortality, that we do not live in spite of death. We live because of it. Death is the edge that sharpens joy, the silence that makes laughter louder, the darkness that makes firelight beautiful. And so, against this solemn backdrop, something marvelous happens. Music begins. Bread is shared. Ribbons fly in the wind. Laughter erupts from the belly like birds startled into flight. For even in the shadow of death, perhaps especially there, joy finds its place. Let us now step into the dance. In the midst of hardship, joy erupts with surprising intensity. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask if the harvest was good, if the children are well, if the ache in your bones has faded. Joy simply arrives, uninvited, but not unwelcome, like a burst of sun through a break in the storm clouds. In a world shaped by struggle, celebration becomes sacred. Feast days are not occasional. They are essential. They are the punctuation in a long, unending sentence of toil. The calendar is woven with saints and solstices, each one a reason to pause, to sing, to eat more than you should. These days mark more than time. They mark survival. Another season passed, another planting done, another child baptized, another soul laid to rest. Joy and grief walk together into the feast hall. The square fills early. Garlands are hung. Bread is baked with more care, more honey, more flour than usual. Barrels are rolled out, not for trade this time, but for laughter. Music begins, not orchestras or polished performance, but a fiddle straining against time, a drum made from stretched skin and memory. The rhythm is not perfect, but it is felt deeply. Bodies begin to move, not from instruction, but from instinct. You feel the ground beneath your feet echo with the beat. You feel the joy rise, not as a thing apart from sorrow, but braided with it. Your body remembers before language, before clocks, before consequence, how to sway, how to laugh, how to forget the ache in your hands and the worry in your stomach. Children run barefoot, their voices wild in the air. Old women dance with younger men. Strangers become kin for the span of a single song, a shared loaf, a passing drink. These moments become the stitches in the fabric of the village, tiny, joyful knots that hold everything together when the winter comes again. You watch as clothes, normally plain, take on color, ribbons, bright sashes, wreaths of flowers or wheat. The same woman who tends her garden in silence now laughs with her head tilted to the sky. The man whose back is always bent stands straight in dance. Everyone becomes a version of themselves that the ordinary days do not permit. There is food, rich and spiced. Things kept in storage for too long, now brought out with pride. Pies with berries, stews with more meat than usual. A pal poured freely. The scent of roasting hangs in the air like a promise. This is not excess, it is release. You do not know when you will eat this well again. That is what makes it taste so good. The stories begin as the sun starts to sink. Someone brings a drum, someone else a tale. Laughter ripples like wind in grain. You hear about saints who cured cows, about girls who danced so well they married into nobility, about witches caught by the shape of their shadows, about knights who forgot their swords but remembered to sing. Truth blurs into legend.
No one minds.
The stories are not for accuracy, they are for belonging. You see how joy is not just emotion, it is architecture, a structure built into the year. These moments are necessary because they hold the rest together. You endure winter because you remember this night. You plant in cold soil because you know this warmth will come again. You live through loss because you've tasted laughter. Pleasure is not constant, it is fleeting, but that's what makes it precious. A shared kiss behind the hayloft, a secret apple stolen from the feast table, a flower tucked into your sleeve, a song hummed into your bowl of soup. These moments do not last, but they return like comets, brilliant, brief, unforgettable. The church bells may call you to prayer, but it is music that calls you to life. Not polished performance, but raw handmade sound. Reed pipes, dulcimers, fiddles and drums, hands clapping, feet stomping, voices rising not in harmony, but in hunger for joy. These are not trained singers. These are people who sing because they must. The body remembers what the mind forgets, how to move, how to let go, how to find freedom in repetition. You spin until the sky tilts, until the laughter rises unbidden from your chest, until the ache in your feet feels like proof that you were here, that you lived, that you took part in the miracle of joy.
And the celebrations do not erase the hardship. They do not pretend the pain is gone, but for one day, one night, they make space around it. They offer a room inside the body where sorrow cannot enter. Not yet, not while the fire's burning, not while the drum is beating. Even the poor have their pleasures, especially the poor. A wild strawberry, a cup of cider, a carved token from a lover, a hand resting on your back during a song. The joy is not in the thing, It is in the sharing of it, the knowing that someone thought of you, reached toward you, wanted you to taste sweetness. The feast becomes a mirror of the village itself, everyone visible, everyone part of the pattern. The Lord may have more, the beggar less, but for one day they both wear colour, they both lift their heads, they both listen to the same song. The fire is lit, not just for warmth, but for gathering. Its light draws bodies close. It flickers across faces both beloved and unfamiliar. Secrets are exchanged. Eyes meet. Promises made. Laughter spills. You sit shoulder to shoulder with people you spend your life beside but rarely see so clearly. As the moon climbs higher and the music slows, you feel something ancient settle into your bones. A calm that comes not from absence of trouble, but from presence of joy. The fire dies down. The last cups are drained. Someone begins a lullaby, not for children, but for the night itself. These celebrations are not escape. They are remembrance. They remind you of what matters, of what lasts, not gold, not titles, but shared bread, shared breath, shared songs that echo long after the voice goes quiet. You fall asleep that night with sore feet and a full heart, the ache of joy still warm in your muscles, and in your dreams the ribbons still fly, and the music still plays, and the stars above the village are just close enough to reach. And among these flickering moments of music and myth, the stories begin to rise. Real lives, once lived in this same world, each with their own quiet journey through hardship, through love, through time. Let us now step into one of those lives. A man with dust on his boots and stories in his pockets. He was born to a family of modest means, his horizon marked by hedgerows and a distant steeple. The fields were familiar, the roads few, and the farthest thing he'd seen was the market 2 villages over. But even as a child, Thomas stared at the wagons that passed through, their wheels heavy with foreign dust, and felt something pull, a hunger, not for wealth, but for elsewhere. His father wanted him to take up the plough. His mother prayed he'd join the cloth. But Thomas learned early that some paths whisper louder than others. And so one day, with a pouch of dried apples and a few coins sewn into his hem, he followed the road out, not knowing where it would end, only that it did not circle back to home. He became a travelling merchant, though no one gave him that title at first. He called himself a carrier, a runner, a go-between. He carried what people could not find where they lived: salt for inland villages, wool cloaks for those who had never seen sheep, beads for places where the rivers made glass rare. In return he collected stories and dust. Thomas learned quickly that goods carried more than value. They carried dreams. A bolt of silk was not just fabric, it was the whisper of a faraway port, of ships and spice and cities no map in his village had ever drawn. A packet of cinnamon could hush a crowded room. A carved comb might become a dowry. The smallest thing, if rare enough, became sacred. His feet bled in every season. Winter froze them. Summer scorched them. He walked roads cobbled and rutted, paths muddy and narrow, borders that shifted with war and rumour. Sometimes he travelled with a caravan, sometimes alone. Wolves howled in the distance more than once. Bandits came close. He learned to hide valuables inside sacks of dung and to sleep with one eye open. But for every danger there was wonder. A sunrise over a misted valley in Bohemia, the clamour of bells in a city whose name he couldn't pronounce, a cup of wine shared with strangers who spoke with their hands, a child who gave him a flower instead of payment. These things he did not sell. These things he carried in silence. He learned languages not from books but from necessity. A word for safe, a word for bread, a word for please. These became his second skin. He could not write letters, but he could negotiate a price in 4 tongues. His coin pouch was rarely full, but his mind was, with the shapes of other skies, the faces of other gods, the laughter of other fires. He saw plague before others spoke of it. Black flags in the windows, smoke that lingered too long, streets too quiet. He became a courier of grief as much as goods. "Don't go east," he would say. Or the fevers reached Bruges. People listened, not because he was a scholar, but because he had seen. He was a living newspaper passing tragedy from one town to the next. Sometimes he stayed a week, a month. He once fell in love with a widow who ran a stall of herbs and honey. Her hands smelled of lavender. She laughed with her eyes. They made a place together for a while, but the road, like a tide, pulled him back. He left with more than he came, with a locket of her hair and a grief that made his footsteps heavier. He kept a ledger of sorts, not with ink, but in memory. He remembered who owed him and who fed him for free. He repaid kindnesses in ways that didn't always look like coins. A loaf of dried fruit left at a door, a mended wheel, a story told when the silence got too long. The world, he believed, ran on quiet debts. His body aged faster than his years. By 40 his beard was streaked with silver. His hands curled at the knuckles. His knees protested every morning, but still he walked. He knew no other rhythm, and besides, the road had become something more than stone and mud. It was him. To stop would be to vanish. Thomas died far from the village of his birth, in a port city where the air tasted of brine and foreign tongues. He was not buried beneath the yew trees of his mother's church, but in soil that knew nothing of his name. Still, a candle was lit. A priest said words. Someone wept. Perhaps a fellow traveller who had shared a fire, or a market girl who remembered his kindness. His satchel was opened after his death. Inside, a smooth stone from the Black Sea, a carved spoon, a worn coin with no kingdom, a scarf too small for warmth, a pressed flower, long faded. No one knew what these meant, but they were clearly precious, and in that Thomas was remembered. He was not a lord, not a scholar, not a name written in any chronicle, but he stitched the world together with every step. He carried pieces of one place into another. He made bridges out of boots. He brought news and goods and laughter and silence. He mattered, and though he rests in a grave with no heir to tend it, his footprints remain in the forgotten ruts of roads now overgrown, in the faded memory of a widow who once danced with a man who smelled of dust and nutmeg. His greatest journey in the end was not to any one place, but from anonymity to presence, from the edge of the village map to the margins of memory. And now, as the fire dims and the merchant's story settles, we turn to another kind of life, less travelled, more hidden, but no less profound. The life of a woman who served others, lived between layers of power, and carried the secrets of those who never once looked her in the eye. Let us now follow Eleanor. She was born to dust and destiny, her future written in her mother's calloused hands. Eleanor did not choose her path. It was sewn into her cradle linen, whispered into her childhood lullabies. Her mother worked in the manor's kitchen, her aunt in the laundry, her grandmother once served the lady's mother before her. Service was inheritance, a silent contract, a birthright, not of land, but of labor. She entered the great house as a girl, 11, maybe 12, wide-eyed and quiet. Her first task was to sweep the stairs. She did it for hours, not just to clean, but to learn, to observe who passed, who paused, who mattered. She learned the creaks in the floorboards, the weight of different footsteps, the smell of perfumes from distant places, the difference between scolding and dismissal. By 16, she became a lady's maid, a position of trust, though rarely of dignity. She dressed the one who dressed for court. She held pins in her mouth as she wound up hair that was not her own. She knew the fastenings of every gown, the stitching of every underlayer. Her hands were steady, her eyes downcast, her presence expected, but invisible. Eleanor lived between worlds, too refined for the scullery, too common for the dining hall. She saw everything and said nothing. She stood in the room when secrets were shared, when tears stained silk sleeves, when lovers left through side doors. She was not family. She was not friend. She was the furniture that moved and breathed. Her hands knew the texture of silk and velvet, though her skin never wore them. She folded lace. She could never afford polished mirrors. She'd never look into as an equal. She watched her lady admire her own reflection and smiled quietly, never revealing the ache that sometimes bloomed in her chest, an ache not of envy but of exhaustion. She rose before the sun, lit the fire, drew the curtains, laid out gowns like offerings. She waited in shadows. She walked behind, always one pace back. She carried messages between the upstairs and the world, between the lady and her longing, between one set of rules and another entirely. She learned to carry more than clothing. She carried moods, anticipated needs, softened tempers, managed embarrassment. She carried secrets too, affairs, illnesses, scandals that could shatter a family name. She learned to look without looking, to listen without reacting, to forget what must never be remembered. But her silence was not emptiness. It was armor, her observation, a kind of power. She knew who visited whom, and when. She knew which smiles were false, which alliances were fraying. She knew that in a household ruled by appearances, the quiet ones often saw the most. She was there when the lady fainted from grief, when the lord shouted behind a closed door, when the youngest daughter returned from the woods with her hem torn and her eyes too wide. Eleanor fetched water, smoothed hair, closed windows. She never asked questions, but she always knew. Her joys were quiet too, a plum tucked into her apron by the kitchen boy, a letter read by candlelight from a brother far away, the rustle of clean linen, the hush of the house at night, a moment of stillness, rare as silk, when no one called her name. She once fell in love with a stable hand who made her laugh. They met in the orchard, spoke in glances more than words. She dreamed for a time of a small cottage, of children with his eyes and her patience, but he was dismissed. After a quarrel with the steward, she never saw him again. She cried once, then return to her duties. That, too, became a kind of muscle memory. Time passed, not in seasons, but in styles. New gowns replaced old ones. New portraits were hung. Children grew and left. Servants came and went. But Eleanor remained, a constant in a world designed to forget those who serve it. Her hair greyed, her hands stiffened, her back bent, one vertebra at a time. She lived not in her own home, but in the servants' quarters, narrow, cold, filled with shared whispers. Her possessions were few, a comb, a rosary, a ribbon from her youth. She wrote no journals, she left no legacy. Her name never appeared in a ledger unless followed by the word wages.
And yet, the household would have faltered without her. She knew where everything was kept. When the linens needed mending, which drawer held the heirloom brooch, when to speak, when to vanish. She was not the voice of the house, but its memory. When the castle came under siege, everything changed. The walls no longer echoed with laughter, but with footsteps and fear. Eleanor did not flee, she bound wounds, hid the silver, sat beside the lady at night, holding her hand as bombs fell in distant fields. Class dissolved, briefly, in the face of death, and still Eleanor served. Her end came quietly, not in fire or drama, a cough that would not leave, a slow fading. The household barely noticed, until she was no longer there to light the fire. A replacement was hired. The work continued. The gowns were still laid out, the curtains still drawn. She was buried without fanfare, a grave with no stone, a name spoken only by those who once leaned on her in their most fragile hours. She left behind no children, no diary, no portrait, but she had held the lives of others in her care, like fragile things cupped in steady hands, and that, too, is history, not the loud kind, not the crowned or chronicled, but the kind that holds the world upright, the kind that smooths the linens, closes the doors, carries the weight without asking for applause. And now, from the hush of corridors and the soft strength of unseen hands, we enter another world entirely, quiet, too, but different, a world of ink and scripture and silence, so deep you can hear the turning of a single page. Let us now walk into the scriptorium and meet Brother Matthew. He surrendered his name to God, becoming Brother Matthew. The world knew him no longer by the surname of his father, but by the silence he chose and the pages he filled. His voice became less about sound, more about ink, and his life, once full of motion, narrowed to a room, a habit, a desk, and a prayer. He entered the monastery as a boy, not out of ambition, but necessity, a second son, too many mouths, a quiet temperament, a family's hope for favour with heaven. The gate opened, he passed through, and the world, as he had known it, faded behind stone walls. The monastery was not a place of comfort, it was a place of order, of rhythm, of restraint. Days measured not by desire, but by bell. Wake, pray, eat, work, pray again, sleep, repeat. The world outside might turn with war, famine, celebration, but within these cloisters, time became still, sacred, structured like a psalm. Matthew's hands,
soft at first, hardened into discipline. He was given quills, not tools, parchment, not ploughs. He did not sow wheat, but words, carefully, deliberately. Each letter a devotion, each sentence a small act of reverence. He copied scripture, sermons, saints' lives, not for fame, not for readers he would ever meet, but because preservation was salvation. The scriptorium where he worked was not grand. It was cold in winter, hot in summer. The light came through narrow windows, enough to see, not enough to comfort. Ink froze, fingers cracked, eyes strained, yet still he wrote, bent over the desk for hours, copying not just language, but legacy. The silence of the room was not empty, it had its own language. The soft rasp of the quill, the quiet sighs of tired monks, the creak of wooden stools, the rustle of vellum, these sounds became his world. They were the symphony of devotion. Brother Matthew knew the shape of every letter better than the faces of his brothers. He could feel when a line was wrong without seeing it. His eyes, trained to pass the tiniest stroke, began to fail him over the years. The margins blurred, the candlelight wavered. Still he worked, squinting through pain. To stop was unthinkable. The words were too sacred. He copied the same texts many times, each repetition a deepening, not a dulling. He knew the Psalms by heart. The prayers became the rhythm of his breath. Sometimes, as he wrote, tears fell not from sorrow, but from something gentler, the ache of beauty. A line perfectly formed, a phrase that echoed with truth. The strange intimacy of scribing thoughts penned centuries before, as if they had waited for him. His tools were humble, a knife to sharpen quills, a block of pumice to smooth the page, ink made from oak gulls and rusted iron, nothing fancy, everything earned. He measured his days in lines completed, his joy in pages without error. He rarely left the monastery walls, perhaps once a year, to collect parchment or pigment. The world beyond always struck him as loud, too bright, too fast. He returned each time with relief, breathing easier within the cloistered hush. He was not made for the bustle, he was made for margin notes. Illuminated manuscripts were rare luxuries. Sometimes a visiting patron would commission a holy book, offering gold for gilding, lapis for blues, vermilion for blood reds. Matthew assisted, but was never the artist. His gift was not in flourish, but in fidelity. He was the quiet force behind the beauty, the bones beneath the skin. He slept in a shared cell, ate simple food, kept no personal items, but a smooth stone from his youth and a scrap of psalm tucked in his sleeve. His joys were subtle, a warm fire, a letter from a nearby abbey, a candle that burned evenly, a day when his fingers did not shake. He did not speak often, but when he did, his words were measured, careful, like the lines he wrote. He had little interest in debate, but great interest in meaning. He did not seek answers as much as he sought depth. The difference mattered. Years passed. His spine curled like a question mark. His beard thinned. His writing grew smaller, tighter. more inward. He began to feel time in his wrists, in his breath, in the slow unrolling of each new page. He began to write more slowly, not from weakness, but from reverence. He knew by then what it meant to record something for someone you would never meet. He copied not just texts, but himself. His devotion etched into each character, his patience pressed into the parchment. His labor was anonymous. His life, a footnote, but what passed through his hands would endure, would outlive towers, and kings, and plagues. When he could no longer see clearly enough to write, he began assisting the younger scribes, guiding hands, correcting form, offering silence when they fumbled, so they might find steadiness again. He spoke less, but meant more. He had become the thing he had copied all his life. A vessel, his final manuscript, remained unfinished. A page, half done, ink pooled beside an uncapped well. His fingers had stilled in the middle of a line from Isaiah. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. That is where it ended. They buried him in the Abbey garden, a small wooden cross, no inscription, but inside the scriptorium, the manuscripts he touched remained. Some would travel to distant lands, some would rest on cathedral shelves, some would be lost to time, but all bore traces of him. Brother Matthew left no descendants, no wealth, no fame, but he left something rarer, a lineage of words, of thoughts preserved, of prayers kept alive. He was a guardian of meaning, a servant of ink, and in that quiet devotion he joined the long, slow current of history, not at its center, but beneath it, where the true foundations are laid. And now, as the ink dries and the candle dims, our journey begins to settle. You've walked through fields and feast days, followed merchants and midwives, listened through the silence of scribes. But before we return fully to rest, let us drift one last time into the space where dreams soften, where endings come gently, and the world of the past releases its hold. And now you drift back to your bed, crossing centuries with the ease of a closing eyelid. The fields fade, the stone walls dissolve, the candle guttering on Brother Matthew's desk becomes a quiet thought in your mind. The stories have all been told, for now the sounds of carts and chants and crackling hearths recede like waves at nightfall. The medieval world slips away, not abruptly, but like fog retreating into the trees. You do not leave it, it leaves you, gently, without resistance. Its textures remain in the corners of your thoughts, the scratch of wool, the scent of bread, the hush of chapel shadows. These things stay with you, not as facts but as feelings. You are no longer standing in a village square or kneeling on a church floor. You are here, in your room, your century, your skin, and yet something of them lingers. The softness, a reverence, a reminder. The rhythm of that world has quieted your own. You breathe slower now. Your limbs settle. Your thoughts no longer race forward, but turn inward toward stillness, toward peace. The world outside your window may hum with neon and noise, but in your mind, the bell of Vespers is still ringing, echoing across time. Perhaps we carry more of that world than we realize, in our longing for meaning, in our instinct to gather, in the way we light candles in times of grief, in how we kneel, not always in prayer, but in humility, in our wish to mark days with celebration, not just passing. We are not so far removed. After all, the stories change, the tools evolve, but the human heart remains tethered to rhythm, to ritual, to one another, the need to survive, to remember, to love, to wonder. That part never aged, and as your breathing slows, and the weight of history lifts from your shoulders, you begin to feel the tenderness of endings, not tragic, not abrupt, just complete. You remember the mother rising before dawn to bake, the merchant walking through strange cities with a satchel full of news, the maid carrying silk and secrets in equal measure, the scribe, his eyes failing, still tracing sacred lines, the fire-lit dances, the winter fasting, the rhythm of the plough, the way joy and grief held hands under the same roof. Their lives were hard, but not without beauty. Their days were brief, but not without meaning. Their deaths were quiet, but not forgotten, not while someone remembers. And tonight, that someone is you. The medieval world has been many things in your imagination, strange, harsh, distant, but now it is something else entirely known. Not as a textbook, but as a feeling, not as data, but as breath. There is no final fact here, no quiz, no summary, just a soft settling of story into sleep. Let it rest, let you rest. The flickering torch becomes your bedside lamp, the parchment, your pillow. The starlit fields become the quiet beneath your closed eyes, and the stories, they'll wait for you. They always do, because sleep, like history, is a returning, a remembering, a soft surrender. So let your muscles loosen, let your thoughts grow quiet, let your mind unclench its grip on this day. The candle of consciousness flickers, the breath slows, the dust settles, and now, sleep, the great equalizer of all human experience, welcomes you into its